Okay. Well, it's 6 o'clock, and firstly, good evening to everyone, and thank you for attending this meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee. Before I go to the formal agenda, can I firstly welcome Mr. Hendicott, who is the Chair of Standards Committee, who's joining us as an observer tonight online. So welcome to you, Mr. Hendicott. Secondly, can I just mention that Tom will be leaving after item 7, given his very hectic couple of days. So thank you for that. And Councillor Goodjohn is likely to leave us at 7 o'clock. Is that right? Yeah, thank you very much. Obviously, this meeting is being recorded. And if you are online and you want to speak, just raise your hand. If you're in the chamber, then obviously I normally see you. So we'll deal with that. If you have got a mobile phone, please ensure it's switched off or to silent. Thank you very much. Right, go to the agenda then. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Gareth Ball. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gareth. Apart from that, we've got a full house. Item 2 are the minutes of the extraordinary meeting held on the 20th November 2025 for correctness only. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Prothero? Thank you. Thumbs up. Thank you. Anyone against? No. Thank you very much. Item 3, to receive any declarations of interest and the nature of said interest in the Council's Code of Conduct. Are there any? No. Item 4 then is the Treasury Management Mid-Year Report 25-26, a referral from Cabinet to us. Matt.
Evening, everyone. I was just going to give this a brief intro and highlight some of the key points from the report. It's all relatively stable and under control, so no surprises is the overall message. It's the mid-year report, and it's prepared in compliance with SIPVA's Code of Practice on Treasury Management. Covers a fair amount of ground, starts off with an economic update. So there's a detailed report on the factors that have been driving the UK economy during the period under review. So that's just up to the 30th of September half year. There's analysis of interest rate forecasts for the period, December 25 out to March 28. It's interesting that it talks about a potential further interest rate cut this year, and I think we're likely to see that probably later this week. There's quite a lot of speculation about interest rates coming down to 3.75% on the back of the disappointing GDP figures for October. Treasury Management Strategy 2025-6 review. So we're reviewing our strategy continually and reporting on that at the half year. No policy changes to the Treasury Management policy and investment strategy at this point. We're also reporting a report on capital expenditure and our prudential indicators review. The indicators are based on the Q2 capital monitoring, and the same cabinet report this went to the Q2 capital monitoring goes as well as the revenue. Everything's in sync in terms of our reporting. We're required to raise £20 million in new loans to finance the capital programme this financial year, and there's detail on that in Appendix 1 that gives the detail of our current prudential and treasury indicators and the outlook for the next few years. And following advice from our treasury advisors, all new loans have been borrowed over a shorter term at present, and that's on the back of interest rates being forecast to fall. Worth noting as well, we've changed treasury advisors. We're now with Arling Close. We're very happy with the previous advisors as well, but it is the right thing to change advisor from time to time, go back out to tender, and a change does tend to give you a different perspective on things, and we're certainly seeing that from Arling Close to date. So the initial signs of our working with them is good. Investment portfolio. These investments at the end of September were at just short of £52 million. That's up from 17 million at the 1st of April. I guess it's worth reminding ourselves that our balance sheet date at the end of 2024/5 is always a snapshot in time. Councillors tend to do well in terms of cash flow with grants and council tax take during the year, so that investment balance isn't a particular surprise. Interest earned was at a rate of 4.22%, which is quite good, between 1st of April and 30th of September, and that brought in just over £1 million. It did briefly talk about our borrowing strategy. New external borrowing taken during the first 6 months is £6 million, and that's been an average rate of 4.56%. And as per advice, there are high current borrowing costs, so we're borrowing shorter term, and for that, by shorter term we mean up to 7 years, and we are generally expecting rates to fall during that period. Then we've had some maturing public works loan debt, and that's been repaid in the first 6 months of the year, so there's just short of £6 million repaid, and that debt at an average interest rate of 4.47%. So you'll see we are borrowing now at slightly higher than some of the debt that we're repaying. Borrowing undertaken during the period in review was in respect of the general capital fund expenditure, so that's published in our approved capital programme. We have that 20 basis points below the standard PWLB rate. We're also, and we've been having this discussion with our previous advisor and the new one, looking to extend the maturity profile of new loans up to 12 years from Q3, and that is to reduce our exposure to interest rate fluctuations over the medium and longer term. Our debt at the end of September was just over £170 million, and that's up marginally from the 169 at the end of last financial year. Not surprising given the new debt we've taken and the maturing debt, so relatively flat position. External interest now is at an average of 4.38% on that debt, and just over £3.5 million was paid out against those loans the first 6 months of this year. Estimated total interest then to be charged to internal borrowing for loans pools is at just short of £1 million at a rate of 4.19%, and the average rate of interest for pooled loans, both external and internal, is 4.47%, so a little bit higher. Debt scheduling, we report on that. We've not considered any debt rescheduling opportunities so far this financial year, and I'd be surprised if any do arise throughout the rest of the year either. So that's just a brief introduction, and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Matt. I think a comprehensive update in regards to the 6 months. So any questions for anyone? No? Any comments from anyone? None? Okay. Can I just say the recommendation is that we note the contents of the report. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Thank you. Anyone against? No. Thank you very much. Items.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Item 5 then is the temporary accommodation long-term crisis. Obviously, we've got the Audit Wales report before us, so I don't know whether Sam's going to introduce that. And can I just say welcome to Mike as well? Thank you. Who I'm sure will address the recommendations moving forward. But firstly, over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Chair. I'll give a brief overview of our report, which, as you know, was published last July, and I'll then hand over to officers to talk through the Council's management response form. So the purpose of the review was to explore Council's responses to the increasing levels and complexity of demand for temporary accommodation, and to identify opportunities to improve value for money. So our approach included a survey of all Council Section 151 officers and heads of housing. We also interviewed Welsh Government representatives and third sector organisations. So overall, the report highlights that the demand for temporary accommodation has increased almost fivefold in the last decade, and that's illustrated in Exhibit 1, giving rise to significant increases in levels of expenditure. For example, in 2019, council spent around 28 million in total, compared to nearly 172 million in 23-24. And again, that's illustrated in Exhibit 3. And this, with the backdrop of ongoing financial challenges, means that councils are basically operating in a reactive firefighting mode, and focusing on trying to meet and manage demand rather than prevention and value for money. So the report states that councils have made limited progress in improving the prevention of homelessness and reducing the demand for temporary accommodation. And councils are also not assessing the value for money of their current temporary accommodation provision. So the report is split into 3 sections with 3 key findings. The first, councils spend significant sums of money on temporary accommodation, which is often not meeting people's needs. Our second finding relates to prevention. We found that councils have made limited progress in improving prevention of homelessness to achieve better outcomes and to reduce costs. And then finally, the third section of the report simply sets out some notable practice examples. And this is with the intention to help share some approaches that councils could potentially use to improve the current situation. This then gave rise to 3 recommendations, and these focused on defining and evaluating value for money, strengthening the planning of homelessness prevention through better use of data, and modelling the impact of policy and legislation changes on councils' workforce needs. So following the report, we then asked all councils to complete a management response form, and we found that the council had appropriately considered and responded to all of our recommendations. So that's all I wanted to say, Chair, as a brief briefing.
No, that's great. Thank you, Sam. And obviously we've got the 3 recommendations and the management response. So, Mike, did you want to pick that up?
Yes, thank you. I think at the outset, I think it'd be fair to say we were already on a journey in terms of trying to reduce our spending in relation to temporary accommodation. As members of the committee may be aware, a lot of funding flowed in from Welsh Government in the early days of the COVID response, and that grant funding was tapered off then over the subsequent 2 or 3 years. We'd set ourselves a target through our rapid rehousing plan, which the council had adopted probably 18 months or more ago, and set ourselves the challenge of exiting the hotel provision that we currently had, and members will be aware that predominantly that was a 1 hotel solution at the Holiday Inn Express. So over that 6-month period towards the end of financial year 24-25, our intention was to exit at the end of the contract with the Holiday Inn Express, and we were able to do that successfully over the period. A couple of factors that enabled us, probably more so than anything else. We'd developed the 90-unit modular accommodation site at Eagleswell, which enabled obviously a substantial increase in temporary accommodation provision. We were successful in working with the private sector. We have a private sector leasing scheme in the Vale of Morgan, and we were also attracting private landlords to work with us to provide temporary accommodation. So as you can see from our response, we indicate that there is an existing range of accommodation provision to meet and to cater for a number of needs. All of our temporary accommodation that we currently use meets the Welsh Government standard in relation to WHQS. So the accommodation, apart from some of our shared accommodation, is has its own facilities, own bathroom, own kitchen, etc. Subsequently, we've been adding to the stock of temporary accommodation. Members will have seen reports in relation to the Olives in Barry, which came online this year. But we're also mindful of the fact that homelessness is increasing. We are seeing more cases coming through the door, which is not unique to the Vale. It's a rising problem across Wales. And we're also mindful that the new homelessness legislation due to be passed during this Senedd term will address some of the other issues that were mentioned in the report. The focus on prevention. Prevention, as we all know, is better than cure. And at the moment, I use the analogy of we're, from a hospital perspective, I guess, where we're creating more ambulances at the moment, but we haven't got the beds to move our patients into. And that's somewhat the position we are with temporary accommodation. We don't want to get to a position where we're bed blocking our temporary accommodation. So we are using all the levers available to increase the TA in the short term, but clearly our medium and long-term ambitions are to build our way out of the crisis that we're currently in. And this council is dedicating substantial capital resources in terms of the programme. In terms of prevention, as I mentioned, prevention is better than cure. Members may be aware that one of the pillars of the new legislation is a prevention first approach. And as a result of which we've already done some of the modelling which is talked about in the report about using data and modelling to try and appreciate and understand what the impact of that new legislation is likely to be. It's fair to say in the middle of a crisis, most of my staff in housing are currently dealing with crisis. They're dealing with people who are already homeless. Our prevention statistics from 2019-20 through to now are much lower than they were. We were regularly preventing at around 80%. We were in the top quartile of local authorities prior to COVID. And we have struggled, obviously, to increase that prevention activity. In saying that, in responding to that, we know that the potential is the new legislation will potentially increase numbers, but also opportunities. I've put in a cost pressure to the council for additional staff as a loss leader, if that's probably the wrong term, but effectively to get on top of prevention and then obviously potentially looking at the resource allocation then over the next 2 to 3 years. In terms of the other recommendations, we have a rapid rehousing plan that is due for review. And we'll be reviewing that in the first part of next year. And if there are subsequent changes that need to be made in relation to the action plan that follows the rapid rehousing strategy, we'll do so. We've made some other changes since we submitted our response to the report. Cabinet will be taking a report tomorrow on a local lettings policy change. That will hopefully, as I mentioned, in terms of the medium to long-term aspirations, will allow us greater flexibility in availability of permanent accommodation to meet the needs of some of our clients who are in temporary accommodation. I think ultimately our response is a good news response to the report. In the financial year 24-25, and certainly at the time of the report, we'd reduced our spending, as you can see in the report, from 3.2 million down to just under £270,000. We are currently using one small Barry hotel at the moment as an emergency provision, particularly for single homelessness. But the medium-term aspiration is that we would come out of bed and breakfast, hopefully in its entirety, as we reduce our reliance on that. Apart from that, as I say, we are still, next year we will have another 20 units of temporary accommodation that the council is currently in the process of refurbishing ready. 1 unit, 10 units will be available around the autumn of next year, and the other 10 units probably into the first quarter of 2027. So we're not resting on our laurels, but as I say, ultimately what we don't want to create is a situation where we're relying on temporary accommodation to provide the long-term housing, meeting the long-term housing needs of our residents in the Vale. I'm happy to take any questions.
No, thank you, Mike. Thank you for that. And I think, quite a comprehensive response and management's response into this issue. It is, as you say, it's not only a Wales-wide, it's a UK issue, really. But, it's great to see that the authority is dealing with it head on. But you don't know what's coming. That's the issue. And as we say, every authority in Wales has had the same report, and it'll be interesting to see the good practice that comes out with everyone. Okay. Any questions from anyone? Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Mike. One of the things we're talking about the financial consequences of temporary accommodation, and one of the things that I think often gets missed is that we pass costs to other things when we get it wrong. So where you may hit the cost may hit your budget line. For example, if we get temporary accommodation wrong and children, the cost of children being in the wrong location, bouncing between school and school, inappropriate behaviour, lands elsewhere. This doesn't capture that. I suppose this is a question for the audit team as well, but also I wonder what your perspective is on that. It doesn't seem to cover that, so it'll be interesting perspective on that. Just the other thing, I'm really keen on some of the modular builds that you've had around town. The one in the old, just on the corner of Court Road. Are there any opportunities for those small scale accommodation builds being put up because they can get done with little regard to planning, can't they? I use that term carefully. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper, for prompting. I should have mentioned that in terms of families, we've not placed any families in bed and breakfast accommodation this year, which was the position prior to COVID. And I know the council was particularly proud of that position because many other local authorities in Wales and the UK are using and continue to use inappropriate accommodation. It's fair to say. Interestingly, the new legislative framework takes account of that in terms of suitability. So it will place additional responsibilities on local authorities to ensure that its accommodation is not passing on those costs or those demands or those issues for families going forward. It is going to be a challenge, though, because temporary accommodation as is finite, and it is, as you say, it is where it is at the moment. But we do pay regard to the needs of individual families, whether that be accommodating in school catchment areas, the age of children, if they're in their final year of their GCSEs or their A-levels, we'll take account of that as well. Medical factors, so if people are regularly having to attend hospitals and specialists. So we do the best we can. I wouldn't say we're perfect in every regard. We do the best we can with the resources that we have. The new legislation, as I say, will make that task effectively a family could indicate that they feel that accommodation is unsuitable because of A, B and C, and we will have to take regard of that as well. In terms of your second point around MMC, again, thank you for prompting. We're currently undertaking a survey of all our council-owned garage sites in the Vale of Glamorgan. We have a number of larger sites which potentially are not all allocated. Not all of the garages are allocated. Part of the problem we have with some of our garages at the moment is you couldn't put an SUV in them or a larger vehicle in them. So they are being used more and more as an additional storage facility rather than a garaging facility for cars. So we are looking at some of those sites and hopefully we'll be able to bring that report back to Cabinet, I would imagine around March or April time. A lot of the surveys are done, but a lot of background work is being done now on things like planning issues. You mentioned a lot of these things you can look to progress in the short term without planning. But equally, a lot of the garage sites are backyard developments, which even wouldn't be suitable. So that due diligence is going on at the moment. But yeah, we're looking at a range of opportunities to bring forward some of these sites. Not only as new sites for new build NMMC, but the council has an aspiration at some stage in the future. The 90 units of modular accommodation I mentioned in Eagleswell, the plan is to relocate those units into the areas where they are needed most, whether that be Barry, Penarth or wherever. So there is a plan at some stage to demobilise some of those. An MMC, as you say, is a quicker option rather than 2 or 3 years it takes from a site to when it goes through planning.
Councillor Prothero.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mike, Mike, for that. I just wanted to ask a few questions, if I may, about another group of homeless people. It's horrendous and it is a crisis, and it doesn't matter how old you are, but for pensioners, homelessness with their vulnerabilities is just horrendous. And I actually have experienced seeing, and it's one of the saddest things I think, and it has stayed with me, a very elderly gentleman with all of his belongings in a shopping trolley, and his little Jack Russell, he was crying, the dog was shaking. There is a good end story to this. We did find him accommodation, but the dog had to go elsewhere for a fortnight. So my question is, when it comes to prevention and when it comes to the work we're doing with our partners, as for our pensioners, and they are a seriously vulnerable group, and this is an issue for them, is there something else that we can do on top of what we're doing for everybody else? Certainly with your new resource. Thank you.
Thank you. Fortunately, there are very few people in that situation, appreciating how vulnerable those individuals are, particularly. But there are very few pensioners, for want of a better term, that we see that come through the service. We would try as far as possible for those individuals not to go into any form of temporary accommodation if there was available permanent older persons accommodation available. And that will happen more often than not because approximately 40% of the council's stock is older person designated. So a subsequent, a large proportion of our stock does turn over fairly rapidly. However, as I say, to see anyone in that situation is something we would try and prevent as far as possible. In terms of the situation you mentioned around pets and animals, it's fair to say most of our temporary accommodation, certainly our shared accommodation, we don't allow pets, particularly dogs and cats, within the shared accommodation. Some of our accommodation does allow and is not self-contained. And again, I go back to that's as I indicated earlier, we don't have a one-size-fits-all response to temporary accommodation. So where we can, we have a range of options that may suit particular client groups more than others, and we will try as far and best as possible to accommodate that. But hopefully not something that happens too regularly. And as I say, our response would be to, as far as possible, to place that person directly into accommodation if it's available.
Are there any other? Councillor Prothero, is that okay, or do you have some other questions?
I just wanted to thank Mike and also thank him and his team.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm sure he notes that. Are there any other questions? No? I've got two questions, Mike. Obviously, paragraph 2.6, as you say, great to see that bed and breakfast spend reduced from 3.277 million down to 298,000. So really, it was a cut of £3 million. But there's a consequence of that, isn't there? Because there will either have to be some capital spend somewhere, like the investment in the 90 units at Eagleston. So whilst there's a saving in one budget head, there's a reduction, there's an increase somewhere else, and I assume that will be funded from elsewhere, or is it funded from within the housing account or whatever? And the second question I got is the issue around the new legislation and the costs. Obviously in the recommendation response you've said that you've put in a budget request for additional staffing. Do we know how much that additional request is for?
If I take the second one first, so we've put in forward a cost pressure of approximately £200,000, which would create a new prevention team. As I mentioned earlier, all of the existing staff resources currently firefighting the existing cases that we have. Over time, I would anticipate that injection, should it be approved by council, would enable us then to move the barometer. So instead of spending lots of money in a crisis situation and trying to get ahead of the curve and reduce some of the anxieties that Councillor Prothero has just mentioned in people already being homeless and having those additional cost burdens, potentially whether they be health or social care or whatever it may be. So hopefully members will see that as a very positive response. In terms of the, you're quite right, certainly from a council perspective, the council is using, through the housing revenue account, a lot of its capital resource on a lot of the temporary accommodation. But of course we see a revenue, income from that, whether that be in the form of housing benefit and universal credit, but the capital investment that we make in council temporary accommodation is somewhat cost neutral, so it covers our costs. We've been able to attract private sector landlords into the area. So, for example, Cardiff Road, one of our landlords purchased a substantial former HMO and is providing a 24-hour supported housing scheme there for clients with very vulnerable needs that might otherwise find sustaining accommodation much more difficult and revolve through a system, the extra cost that you mentioned. We also saw through the Welsh Government grant scheme, transitional TACP, transitional accommodation capital grant, and that has assisted in meeting some of the costs of some of those council-owned developments. So it's a mixture of HRA, Welsh Government funded TACP, and a mixture of private sector investment.
Thank you, Mike, for that. Any other questions? Any comments? No, I've got a comment to make in regards to, again, it's the same issue about the new piece of legislation coming in, presumably in the next 6 months, really, before the Assembly goes to be elected. The point you quite rightly make, and it's not only in regards to this legislation, I think it's other legislation which the Welsh Government brings into effect, that no additional funding comes with it, which I think is quite disgraceful, really, because it puts the burden on local authorities, whether it be this piece of legislation or any other piece of legislation. I know that when I was in local government, Welsh Government brought 14 pieces of legislation in with no additional funding whatsoever and expect local government to pick up the tab, which I think is quite disgraceful. I think, you know, when someone does the equalities impact assessment on these new pieces of legislation, I would hope that they pick up that it's actually going to cost someone to deliver it. And you know, that's where the 200,000 really comes in. And I know you use the terminology of a lost leader. I actually don't think it's a lost leader. I think it's an investor save. That's what it is. You know, invest in this, then okay, we'll overcome the peak and then we'll get into the preventative agenda. And I think that's key, and hopefully, you know, members of the authority will understand that. I know the directorates will be pushing exactly the same, but I think there's only one way homelessness is going to go is up. It's not going to drop. And that's been seen by the trend data over the last 10 years. So on that note, obviously, I thank you and certainly thank your team for what they're doing to, assist homeless people in the county borough, because obviously some of them are not there by choice. And it is clearly, an ever-growing issue to be addressed. So if you could thank the team for that, that would be greatly appreciated. The recommendation, I think, basically is I think we note the contents of this report. Secondly, that it be put on the regulated tracker. And third, whether people would support, I think obviously it's got to go back to Cabinet, is whether Cabinet sort of write to Welsh Government to express concern again that no additional funding is coming with this piece of legislation and that local authorities got to pick it up, or is it being hidden in the 4.1% increase the authority will receive given the recent announcement? We got smoke and mirrors here now. You'd get a grant, so we're putting the settlement and it looks really good. So I'll just make that comment. I don't know whether anyone's prepared or happy with that. Councillor Hooper.
Yeah, I'd second that comment and just make reference to the money that's been additional money that's coming to the Vale as a result of the agreement with Plaid Cymru that was reached last week. But one of the things I think we need to be explicit about this particular point. So I think this is worth doing. And I think that I would like to support your recommendation, Chair.
Thank you very
So
much.
I'd second it.
Councillor Goodjohn.
Yeah, can I add to the point that we can ask Cabinet do that? It's up to them whether they do it or not. Why don't we also write to Welsh Government as well? If we have that power ourselves, then we make sure it happens. Doesn't it?
I'm happy to do that. As you know, I'll write to anyone if it aids the cause. But, I think it's quite wrong that pieces of legislation like this are brought in with no, revenue or capital expenditure whatsoever, and you expect the local authority to pick it up. And I think it's as you said, Councillor Hooper, you're robbing Peter then to pay Paul, and you can only rob budgets now and again, because if you started to rob people for housing and then ALN and then something else, all of a sudden you'll be providing no other services in the council. So I agree with that. So the recommendation would be that we ask Cabinet to write, but we will write as we will write as Governance and Audit Committee to Welsh Government to express our concern that there's no funding coming for this piece of work. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Can I have a second there? Councillor Goodjohn. Are there anyone objected or against? No? Thank you very much. Mike, thank you very much for that. As I said, if you want to leave, you can. If you want some stimulating discussion, you can stay. But it's a matter for you. Okay. Next item is item 6, the corporate risk Q2 update. Tom.
I feel pressure to perform in the stimulate the discussion debate, so I'll do my very best. Noswaith, good evening, members. You've got in front of you the Q2 corporate risk register for your consideration this evening. Just before getting into that, I wanted to thank those members who were able to join the briefing last Tuesday, which was a request of the committee previously, just to spend some time looking at how these risks are scored, calculated. I'm conscious that that some members wouldn't have been able to make that, so just to let you know, the recording of the session is available on MemberNet. If anybody would like any further information, always more than happy to do that on a sort of one-to-one or in a small group. One of the things that came out of the briefing last Tuesday, Chair, was drawing members' attention to the background papers of this report as well, which I should do at each presentation, and I haven't in the last couple. Wanted to flag it because within the background papers, you've got access to all the risk templates which are used to support what is in effect a summary report that you've got in front of you this evening. So importantly, for transparency and to enable members to scrutinise in detail. So I want to just flag those. So the report has got two main aspects for consideration this evening, members. The first is around the response from the strategic leadership team to the 2 points that you requested further information on at your previous meeting when you were looking at the risk register. The first of those was around clarification and consideration of the risk scoring of the major regeneration projects risk. You'll see in the report at paragraph 2.2, the response has been provided by the director of place in response to that, and he makes reference to the cabinet report that went in October as well. What I was going to add to in terms of this report is that we had a discussion at SLT last week where we were looking at the nature and facets around this particular risk and suggested that a more detailed update for Q3 might be useful for committee, and if you were minded to, that we would invite the director to present that in a bit more detail. The second of the issues that you raised, members, was relating to the city region in terms of the legal settlement relating to Aberthaw Power Station. Cardiff Capital Region are managing that process, which is ongoing at the current time. There hasn't been any update this quarter. So as soon as we have any update, I'll make sure that that's reflected within the risk register. So turning to Q2 risk updates, currently 12 corporate risks on the register, 1 remaining very high, 5 high, 3 medium high, and 3 are scoring medium on the register. I wanted to draw members' attention, and this is in paragraph 2.6 of your report this evening, to a report that's on the agenda for Cabinet of this week relating to school balances. Audit Wales have undertaken a piece of work on school balances, and that report is going, along with the management response form, is going to be referred to a future meeting of your committee. That will follow consideration by the relevant scrutiny committee as well. As part of that report to Cabinet this Thursday, we're recommending that Cabinet consider a separate standalone corporate risk relating to school balances, or specifically school deficits. And that draft corporate risk, if Cabinet approve it in draft, will also come to your committee for consideration. But because that's entirely a timing issue, for the purposes of Q2, what we've made sure that we've done is update the financial resources risk to have specific information relating to school balances, and members will be aware that the revenue monitoring report, which goes to the resources committee, has also got information relating to school balances. The Startwell Scrutiny Committee also had a presentation last month from the relevant head of service. So that's just a bit of background and something to expect at your forthcoming meeting. In terms of the Q2 risk register itself, all risks have remained static during this quarter in terms of their scoring as at the end of Q2, but important for members to note that there is anticipated movement in the future. And just a quick summary of that anticipated movement, workforce and organisational change is forecast to diminish from its high risk score. There are 6 risks on the register that we're forecasting to increase over the year. The report provides information and an overview as to why, but they relate to information in cyber security, climate change and nature emergencies, the social care demand and capacity risk. Mike, in the previous item, mentioned the housing and homelessness risk, and that makes reference to the new legislation being introduced, and also the physical and digital risks. The 5 remaining risks are forecast to remain at the same level. So that's a really brief introduction, but obviously happy to take any questions members have.
Yes, thank you, Tom, for that, and thank you for specifically mentioning the education school deficits, because I think that's a very important one we need to look at. I understand, obviously, this is Q2 update, but given the press around school deficits as well and the figure that was in the press, clearly if something does go wrong, then there's a huge financial burden that I understand may not fall on the council, but ultimately it'll be the council has to pick up the fallout really in some respects. But on that note, questions, Councillor Hooper?
Thanks, Tom. You beat me with the marina one. I'm glad that's coming back. Just as a point, can we make sure that I note the reference to say that we still comply with the terms of the grant? I find that odd, given that the original thing was for a marina, was the central part to this, and now if it still complies with the value for money terms, so I'd like to get into that. So if you could pass that to the director, I'd appreciate it. And when it comes to City Deal and Aberthor, I presume that stays on as a question until they answer it, because just saying they can't answer it isn't good enough. I think that stays where it is. I'm interested in two of the risks then, and the forecast direction of travel. I'm just interested in the timescale of that, because obviously if you take something like the climate change and nature emergency risk, there are certain political parties that would disregard that climate and nature emergency in its entirety. One of them is on the meeting this evening. I'd just be interested in how far ahead are we thinking about what may happen with regard to the Senate elections that are upcoming and the impact that would have on that. And the last point is in relation to cyber security. I'm just interested in, this is about impact. We've seen Jaguar Land Rover's cyber security hit actually affect national, UK-wide GDP by a number of percentage points. The same with M&S as well. And it just brings to mind the impact it would have on our communities here. So I just wonder whether or not that's needs to be upweighted given the new knowledge we've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper, and absolutely no problem at all. I won't try and answer the question around the value for money indicators because it's not something that I'm experienced in. But I will make sure that when we bring the update by the director at your next meeting of looking at the register, that we do look at those particular aspects. And regarding the Aberthor piece, once the legal process is concluded, absolutely we'll be able to put the information into the risk register. Whilst I might have beaten you to it on the marina, you beat me to it in terms of the forecast direction of travel question. It's something actually that the team have picked up in doing the moderation piece of work that we do at the end of updating the corporate risks, because some of them, when we're talking about, we've got the example here of the workforce and organisational change risk diminishing over time. That one I'm thinking that we will see diminishing within the next 12 months at the very latest, because we're seeing metrics turning in a positive way now in relation to things like absence and retention and attraction of staff. So that one feels like it's going to move relatively quickly. Others may have a slightly longer time period, and the team have actually suggested that it would be useful to put an indicator within the register to show you the sort of timescale that we would be expecting those things to be starting to move. In terms of the Senate elections, we're obviously keeping a close eye in terms of what some of the policies of relevant parties will may or may not be. Once there's a new programme for government, we'll obviously then have a look at the corporate risk register as a whole, and we'll undertake a refresh of that, and the timing of that will, depending on how those negotiations obviously go, will probably coincide with an end of year or beginning of Q1 for the next financial year. The question around cybersecurity absolutely is the reason why we're forecasting for that to increase over time. My colleagues in digital are leading a cyber assessment piece of work at the moment alongside other local authorities. There's a really well-established group which is organised by the WLGA relating to cybersecurity for local authorities. So we're very conscious of the potential risks, and I chair the Council's Information Governance Board on a monthly basis. We look specifically at each of those meetings on any incidents that are related to potential cybersecurity, to keep an eye on the kind of things that we're being presented with, shall I say, and the council is also going to be considering some investment proposals as part of the cost pressures for next year's budget when you meet in March. Some of those are relating to particular security software to make sure that we maintain the council's estate in that way. We're also doing a huge piece of work at the moment in terms of migrating our servers from being on premise in this building and elsewhere in the county to a cloud solution. One of the key aspects of that has been looking at the cyber resilience and security relating to those matters. But I can certainly ask the team to put a little bit more information into the report for you at the next quarter.
Thank you, Tom. Are there any other questions? Matt.
Thank you, Tom. Two questions, if I may. Pick up on the cybersecurity one first, and I was just scanning through the detailed background papers. I think it sounds like you've got a lot going on in the cybersecurity. I'd be keen to know what your thoughts are, maybe not now, but for next time, on how the risk assessment of third parties you work with is taken into account for that as well. It had been an underlying root cause for a number of events. I couldn't see it necessarily overt, but I consciously am scanning through it, so I'm sure it's in your thoughts. But I'd just be keen on that if we're bringing it back. That was very specific. The other one's really macro. I guess I look at it and I say, you've got 3 or 4 of your highest level risk you're forecasting to increase. Understand the reasons in the narrative behind all that, but how does that? Can you give us an insight of how that shapes your thinking in terms of the overall risk profile of the council, and whether the current approach to controls or the current approach to what you're doing? I mean, it's right. I don't know if that's a too vague question, but I'm looking at the control effectiveness, and they're all quite low. So how does that come into the thinking when you're having the discussions at your kind of director level?
Thank you for those, Matthew. I can certainly make sure we reflect some of that third-party information in a future update. It's largely covered in terms of the data sharing and data privacy impact assessment process that we have in place when new systems are being procured and adopted, and we make sure that it's picked up at that point. What I don't have is the piece of the kind of ongoing, how that's maintained. It's a really good question in terms of the kind of overall holistic picture in terms of what we do and the effectiveness of controls. And one of the things we often say to colleagues is that an effectiveness of control score, which is relatively low, doesn't mean that they're not doing a good job at controlling the score, controlling the risk. We say that actually just the risk is often largely outside of the council's control because of policy, because of demand that's being caused within the county, availability of resources, whatever that may be. So it's not to suggest that the performance of individual teams isn't good, and I know you weren't suggesting that. It's just that actually our extent to being able to impact and influence on those risks is sometimes limited. In terms of how it plays in this time of year, it's particularly useful, and as a leadership team we take the register into consideration when we're building the budget. So when members see after Christmas proposals for the budget and importantly the cost pressures which are being proposed to be funded in the council's base budget going forward. Historically, I think if we look at last year's budget, members voted to approve for additional resources going into additional learning needs provision, for example. That's because we can see obviously the highest risk on this particular register. Members also voted to put funding in terms of capital into schemes that would deliver decarbonisation, because we're conscious of the authority's scope 1 and 2 emissions and our ability to directly impact on those things. So there's something about using the register and where we can then influence to match up with what the risks are, what our investment potentially can be in order to tackle some of those things. And what we then look at doing is playing it into the council's transformation programme reshaping. So where we're looking at particular issues relating to the workforce, for example, my colleague Tracy will head up the people board. It's no coincidence that the work that she's been leading has been around attraction, retention, reward, because they're things that we know have a direct impact on well-being and people's ability to then be able to want to stay with us. We're then seeing the metrics on that turning the right curve, and we then start to see that risk diminishing. So it's a really important strategic management tool that helps inform lots of different discussions. Hope that helps.
Any other questions? Any comments? No, just a comment from me. Firstly, to reiterate, Tom, what you said about the presentation, to thank Helen, yourself, and was it Andreas? Yeah, for the presentation. It was greatly appreciated. So if you could pass on our thanks for that, that's greatly appreciated. Obviously, given that the scoring matrix on the risk only go up to 16 and the direction of travel for lots of them at the very top is they'll stay where they are. I should imagine if you increase the scoring matrix, they'd be going up like mad with ALN and such like that. But it's pleasing to hear that when you set the budget that this is used as sort of a tool to do that, and clearly what we discussed previously about temporary accommodation, hopefully housing and homelessness will get a sympathetic hearing from the Cabinet and the members in regards to an Investor Save initiative for them moving forward for temporary accommodation. So on that note, if we go to the recommendations, I think we note the responses given in regards to the recommendations that went from us back to Cabinet. Secondly, that we note the Q2 position of the quarter of the corporate risks outlined in the risk summary. And 3, I'm sure Gareth will pick up any comments which need to go back to Cabinet, certainly in regards to the issues about delivery of major projects, the cyber risks which continuously get raised, the third-party issues in regards to cyber, etc. So is someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Seconder, Councillor Hooper. Anyone against? No, thank you very much. Thank you all. Item 7 is the Q2 25-26 progress against external regulatory recommendations. Helen.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening. So just to give an introduction to the report, as you say, this is reporting our progress against the external regulatory recommendations from both local and national studies. The report should be familiar to members, and we bring this every quarter, and it's also integrated within the annual self-assessment. The tracker is appended to the report with more detail against the different recommendations that have come through those audits, and there's currently 19 actions in that tracker. 18 are on track, so are green, so progress is where we would expect it to be at this time of year. There is one which is a bit slower than progress, and that's amber at the moment, and that relates to work around housing, but work is now taking place to bring in new software to assist with that reporting for tenants and repairs. We would hope to see that now starting to move forward within that. Across the report, it just details that 14 of those recommendations are local recommendations, including the one I've just mentioned around the housing review, and 5 of them are national recommendations, and we bring all of those into the same tracker. The tracker and the information has been already considered by SLT in terms of looking at that progress, and also we do some moderation within the team, and we'll have discussions at Strategic Insight Board. So it follows a very similar approach to that we do with the risks as well, and then making sure that these are informing the work that we take forward. Similarly, all the actions are awarded a priority status as well in terms of how quickly we want to see that progress being made around those recommendations, and that's also detailed with the appendix of the report as well. So we say there is a snapshot of progress within there, as well as that detail against the different actions. We will be seeing this now updated as some of the audit reports are now coming through the committee process. So tonight we've had the one on temporary accommodation. There's some that will be coming soon around, we've already mentioned the school deficits report, and there's one due to come around complaints as well. So you will see quite a few more recommendations being added to this tracker as we move forward, and therefore in terms of the timeframes around taking forward those as well. So really just to bring that to committee's attention in terms of where we are and to review that progress today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Helen. Thank you for the report. Greatly appreciated. Are there any questions? No. Oh, Nigel?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. I think it's a really good level of detail in here. It shows the massive amount of work that's being undertaken. So thank you for the report. Just wanted to sort of just get a bit of reassurance with the number of actions that are due for completion by March 2026, of which that is not very far away. And just the scale of the work on there seems to be pretty massive. So I just wanted to get I don't know, it's sort of alluded to in that, but whether there's a bit more reassurance about the resources to deliver all that work by March. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, as we gather that information each quarter, we are asking people to look at those dates and update us. Now, as we go into Q3, we will particularly push on that point to make sure that if there is any doubt around those actions now coming to an end at the end of the financial year, we can make sure that those dates are amended and reported within those next reports. Obviously, a lot of those recommendations, they're spread across different parts of the organisation in terms of that taking forward. So at present, we are happy with those scheduled dates, but we will make sure that that is fully updated for the Q3 report as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Are there any other questions? Any comments? No, obviously there is a recommendation to remove the completed ones which are on the back sheet. Obviously the issues in regards to that are ongoing, so I suggest we just remove them, and if they need to come back to us, they will come back to us, and thank you for picking up the others. The recommendation is that we note progress to date in regards to the existing recommendations by the external regulators as outlined in Appendix Strategic Insight Board Insight Trackers for the period Q2 25, and that we agree the removal of the committed actions from the Strategic Insight Board Tracker. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Matthew. Anyone against? No, thank you very much. Thank you. Tom, thank you very much for your attendance. Helen, you can go as well if you wish. Item 8, then we've got the finalisation of the annual statement of accounts for South East Wales Corporate Joint Committee and the responses from the Audit Wales and the South East Wales Corporate Joint Committee Section 151 officer. Gareth?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So just bring this report for completeness for the committee, Chair. Back in summer this year, Chair, the committee expressed concern regarding some delays to the finalisation of the City Deal accounts. The Chair wrote to the Auditor Wales, General Auditor Wales in June, and then somebody wrote again to the City Deal Section 15 officer in July. And Appendix A is the response from the Auditor General, and Appendix B is the response from the City Deal Section 151 officer, Chair. So up for committee members to discuss. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Gareth. Obviously, at our last extraordinary meeting, the Audit Wales were present, made specific reference to the South East Wales Joint Committee accounts. They have been signed off for last year. They have been input for this year, and the indication that they gave is that they will be delivered by the due date next year, May. There was a assurance really on that from Audit Wales. So a lot of the issues obviously we were asked to address which were concerning are now in place in regards to their accounts. And as has been said in the report, it doesn't just affect us here, it affects the other 9 authorities in Wales. But on that note, are there any questions? Councillor Hooper?
It's probably more of a comment, and no one can answer any questions anyway here, but just reading through the Auditor General's letter to you, Chair, I noticed that he makes the point that of the complexity associated with the accounts, which we failed to actually, when we had the Section 151 officer with us, we failed to get an answer to what that complexity is. There are people here who've been in accounts for a long time who wouldn't consider these accounts to be complex in any way, and I think that's just a bit of a cop-out. We're disappointed. If only residents were more concerned about how we spend our money on these corporate committees, I think they'd be equally disappointed, and I don't feel particularly any further confidence as a result of these letters in relation to this improving anytime soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. I'm sure those comments will be noted. We're at where we're at. Unfortunately, we got the Auditor General giving some reassurance to us, but there we are. Any other questions? Any comments? No, I think the recommendation basically is that we note the response letters and the contents of the report. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Bear. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Matthew. Anyone against? No, thank you. Item 9, the Governance and Audit Committee Decision and Action Tracker. Gareth?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So it's just a regular standing item for members to have a record of what's happening with informal actions and resolutions. Majority are green, Chair, so most will come off for the next meeting. There is one amber going back to the July meeting in relation to tendering of services, commission of services, Chair, so that we are just requesting some legal clarification around the sharing of the scope. Once that's clarified, Chair, I'll send an update.
Thank you for that, Gareth. Any questions? Andrew?
Thanks, Chair. One of the outstanding recommendations was, outstanding actions was to get a training programme for Governance and Audit Committee. I've drafted a programme. I just need to share it with you as the next stage to see if you're comfortable with it before we roll it out to members.
Thank you for that, Andrew. Any other questions? Any comments? No. The recommendation then is that we note the contents of the report. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Burr. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Matthew. Anyone against? No, thank you. Item 10, Audit Wales National Fraud Initiative briefing note. Sam, are you doing this one? We've lost.
Hi, Sam. You were appearing before. Not sure. Perhaps you need to leave and rejoin, Sam.
Can I suggest that we just defer that until the end? Item 11 is the Internal Audit Progress Report. Andrew, is that yours?
Thank you, Chair. Evening, members. This is one of the regular reports that we bring to committee, so hopefully members will be familiar with the format. But this gives an update in terms of the progress against our agreed audit plan, which you as a committee agreed back in June for 2025-26. So I'll just give a very brief overview of where we are, Chair. We've set ourselves a target to achieve the plan by each quarter. At the end of quarter 2, our target was 30%. The information presented to you this evening takes us to the end of October, so it's just past the quarter 2. As you can see in table 1, the coverage of the audit plan as at the end of October is 38%. So in line with the quarter 2's target and well in line for the quarter 3 target of 50% by the end of December. Members will see that that's made up of issuing of final reports and draft reports, of which we've issued 20 final reports and 2 draft reports, and other audits were in progress at that point in time. Of the 22 audits that we have issued, either in draft or final, the opinions are set out in table 2 with a very good response, 7 substantials, 13 reasonables and 2 limited. So overall we have 91% of our opinions which are either substantial or reasonable assurance, which puts the authority in a good position. For the limited assurance opinions, we have an agreed process in place, Chair, where we have a follow-up audit of a limited opinion, and then we will report back in due course that second follow-up opinion. And if there are two consecutive limited opinions, then members have the opportunity to call in the respective head of service or operational manager to provide further assurances that the agreed recommendations will be implemented in the future. The vehicle fuel management audit was reported briefly to you previously, and the other limited assurance opinion relates to corporate building compliance. That's currently at draft report stage. So once we've finalised that, we'll be bringing a summary of our concerns back into committee. Members will note that we've previously had a call-in for a head of service in relation to the tender evaluation and award project and plan team building services, because that did have two consecutive audit limited opinions. Having done a further follow-up, that opinion is now reasonable, so agreed recommendations were implemented, so it gives us assurance that there are better controls now in place for the overall control environment, governance and risk management. We've also included some information about audits which weren't finalised in 24-25. That's shown in table 3. Of those, 73% are complete, and we've got 1 in progress and 2 will be allocated in either quarter 3 or quarter 4. So just to give you assurances, they will be done. They haven't fallen between the cracks there, Chair. Of the reports that we've issued, we've agreed 113 recommendations, 5 high priority, 47 medium and 61 low priorities, and that will be covered in the report that will follow this evening by Joan. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Another comprehensive report at quarter 2. Questions? Councillor Hooper?
Thanks, Andrew. Just 2 questions. I'm just interested, I appreciate this is a report to the end of October. So after some current information, how many of the unallocated at the end of October are now allocated? Are you able to give us that detail? And I'm also, I've been interested ever since it appeared on the audit plan with this hybrid council meeting audit. I notice in progress. You may remember that I expressed an interest in speaking to some auditors when they're doing this audit. I'm sure other councillors would like to too. Could you provide us with some more information on that? Thank you.
Joan?
Hi, thank you. If I answer the first question, the second question first, the hybrid council meetings, the terms of reference has been issued and the audit is ongoing. I am aware that there are some element of questionnaires going out, and I'm not sure what the sample is or who has been targeted, but I can certainly find out and let you know on that one. But I am aware that there have been some forms of questionnaires. As far as the statistics are concerned, we've done the statistics up until the end of the 30th of November, and all those jobs have been started. And I haven't got to hand the stats, but I can find those and again send them out to you. But we're confident that we are ahead of the game as far as November is concerned, and it'll be a very favourable report as at the end of December.
Any other questions? Any comments? Only comments I'd make. Can you make sure whoever's doing the audit on the hybrid meetings speak to some of those councillors who are extremely interested in hybrid meetings? I know Councillor Hooper's raised it numerous times when it's been discussed, but it would be worthwhile getting feedback from elected representatives across the chamber and across the political spectrum. Okay, if there's no other comments, the recommendation is that we note the contents of the report and the progress made. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Matthew. Anyone against? Nope, thank you. Item 12, recommendation monitoring report. Joan?
Thank you, Chair. Again, this is a standard report that you're familiar with seeing in the format that you're familiar in seeing. As you're all aware, that recommendations are made at the conclusion of an audit review if it is felt that improvement should be made to mitigate risk and strengthen controls. And then the implementation of these are monitored to ensure the risk identified has been addressed. So as always, we've set out in Table 1 the recommendation categorisation that we use. Table 2 within the report then summarises the recommendation status in respect to the audits completed from this year's audit plan. It illustrates that a total of 52 recommendations have been made as at the 31st of October. That's just the medium and the high. We don't follow up or monitor the implementation of the low priority recommendations. So of the 52 recommendations that are high or medium priority, 24 have been implemented and 28 have a future target date. But again, because those are audits completed in this financial year, that's not unusual. Table 3 shows the recommendation status of audits completed prior to this financial year. It's pleasing to note that the table showing there's no overdue recommendations. However, there are 4 recommendations made during 23-24 audits that still have a future target date. Appendix B provides the details of these, but since preparing the report, 1 medium recommendation from the Llywodraethu St Sary's building compliance follow-up audit has been implemented, and that's in relation to the Joint Premises Management Committee. The other one, we're in constant dialogue, and that's on track, and they're hoping that they can provide evidence that that has been completed, ready for the next monitoring report to this committee. Table 3 also states that there's 21 recommendations made in 24-25 audits that still have a future implementation date. These continue to be monitored as well, and any undue delays are reported to the Council's strategic leadership team, because we go there probably every 6 to 8 weeks, and ultimately then they're reported into this committee. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. Are there any questions? Matthew?
Joan, I might have asked this question before, so I apologise. What's the difference between a future dated recommendation and an overdue one, especially when it relates to ones that have been given future dates repeatedly?
Thank you for the question. It's quite difficult to sort of be definitive with that, but an overdue one is if a date is being given and they've exceeded it, but there's no dialogue, there's no action taken, and basically we can't see any progress being made, so it's overdue, but nothing has happened, etc. The ones with the future dates, obviously, if they agree at the beginning of a future date, we accept that, and we point out that the risk therefore exists until that recommendation is implemented. As you continue and they don't hit the agreed date, but they agree a future date, so another date, sorry, because things have changed. For example, if they're implementing a system and there's been a delay in getting that system implemented, so they're aware that they need to move that date forward, and we accept that, and so that's moved to a future date. So maybe in the Appendix B you'll see a few dates, but we've accepted those, and the client have accepted that there's still a risk, and they're accepting that risk until that's implemented. So rather than I think it's the negative wording of overdue is negative to them, whereas they're working with us and they've accepted that they're accepting the risk and they're accepting that there is a future date. I don't know if that's sort of...
Do you mind? I get it, and it's probably not a question for you. The problem is it's a question for the guys who own the recommendations. I guess my cynical viewpoint would be that if I owned a recommendation, why would I just not repeatedly agree a future date with you? There's always going to be some work ongoing, and if I look at some of those that are really old, I call into question maybe whether the amount of work ongoing is there. I guess for me, I get the negative connotation overdue. I think it's important that the work that you guys do in identifying risks that we believe are not adequately controlled by the council are shown that way, not that there are future implementation dates that people are working on things. Because I think the whole point of this is it needs to, and I know Tom's not here anymore, but filter back into that risk management stuff. And I think that's the bit of the loop I'm missing, I guess. how do we make sure we're not pushing the can down the road? And essentially, we've got risks that are not being adequately mitigated.
Thanks, Matthew. Yeah, I totally accept your point there, and we'll certainly consider that moving forward. And I was going to use the phrase "kicking the can down the road" as well, but we make sure that doesn't happen, because we are monitoring the implementation of recommendations on a monthly basis. As soon as they become as soon as they hit their deadline date, the first agreed deadline date. So we are continually monitoring that implementation and seeking evidence from the operational managers to support that. And as Jones already mentioned, we report that into SLT on a 6 weekly basis. So SLT is certainly aware, so directors and the chief exec are certainly aware of the information that you're getting. They see the overdue, they see the future target dates. There is, I guess, it's a technicality in terms of the future dates because it's the circumstances. Implementation of a big system may have significant delays. There may be some resource issues, or the appointment of an individual to put the relevant controls in place. So I think it's just terminology, but I'd like to think that we can give you the assurance that we're on the case, and we certainly don't allow managers to kick the issue down the road. And if we felt that was happening, then we would certainly make SLT aware of that, and we would bring that to your attention as well. We've got to manage that relationship with our operation managers, and they do accept the fact that once they've had an audit, they agree the management action plan, and they need to take ownership of that. So we do work with them to make sure that as soon as practically possible, that recommendation is implemented.
Thanks, Andrew. Are there any other questions? No, can I just reiterate that point? I think you looking at that is important, and I think Matthew's raised a very pertinent question, which you are aware of, and which you're acutely aware of. I think as a committee, we just need to know how many times this date has been put off. Now, there may be reasons, as you quite rightly say, it could be a contractual requirement, it could be X, Y, or Z. But what we don't want is it continually just moving on and on and on. And I think the point Matthew quite rightly makes is that if we can assist you in that, which I know you quite like us doing on occasions, we will assist you. But we don't want you to break down that relationship between the operational manager or whatever and yourselves. But at some stage, the line's got to be drawn in the sand to say enough's enough. So that's the first point. Second point on the two last ones on Appendix B, which is Ysgolhaig and St Cyrus. The revised dates on those are both the 30th of November, which is obviously 15 days ago. But the updates we received were in September and October. So I'm just wondering when the reports are drafted, that date's expired now. I know you gave an oral report in regards to the one, but I think it would be reasonable to assume that we get the update as at that 30th of November or the 1st of December, because otherwise that date will have expired. I don't know, I think on the one you said that's all been dealt with, which is the premises committee, because obviously it says documents being finalised for ratification by the respective governing bodies. So I assume they've been accepted now by the governing body, which would have been great. So that one can be presumably written off. But the other one in regards to documentation and the site visits, it's whether or not those have been complied with now as they've taken place, because otherwise that one slipped again. We got another revised date. So I'm just wondering, the problem you've got is you're at the end of the sausage machine, as I keep saying. Same with the risk register. But it would be useful to have the up-to-date information as possible that comes before us.
Thanks, Chair. We'll certainly take that on board. It's a timing of when we've got get the reports together, when we've got the data, but we'll certainly reflect on that and provide as much information as we possibly can.
Thank you, Andrew. I know you would, but you know, it's and again, unfortunately, you get the question in and not the head of service. But there we are. Okay, if there are no other comments, then recommendation is that we note, I think, the contents of the report. So someone prepared to move, please? Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Anyone against? No, thank you. If we go back to item 10 then, which is the Audit Wales National Fraud Initiative briefing note, and it is a briefing note. Hopefully, Sam, are you with us now?
Hi Sam, are you able to just check if your camera's turned on for us in the settings on the left hand side? I'll send you an email and I'll try and give you a call and see if we can get you back on.
Well, the comment I was going to make, this is an update report in regards to the position Wales-wide in regards to the National Fraud Initiative, and then very specifically in regards to the Vale of Glamorgan Council. Unless anyone's got some very specific questions in regards to the briefing note, then I suggest that hopefully everyone has read it. And if there are no questions on it, as per the recommendation, we note the Audit Wales Governance and Audit, the briefing note at Appendix A. So does anyone have any comments or burning comments on it? No? Or questions? No? Okay, so we've got the recommendation then that we note the briefing note at Appendix A. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Matthew. Anyone against? No, thank you. Item 13, Forward Work Programme. Joan?
Sorry, sorry. Again, this is a standard report that you have before you. Appendix A is the Governance and Audit Committee full programme for 25-26, and within the body of the report is the proposed agenda for the next meeting, which is scheduled on the 23rd of February 2026. So basically, we're asked to endorse the schedule of items for the next meeting on the 23rd and confirm if you would like to invite any people to attend for those meetings and indicate whether any additional information is required. Thank you.
Questions, Councillor Hooper?
So I'm a little bit disappointed that the Cardiff City deal event for tonight was just that one paper of those two questions, because the reason we asked for Cardiff City deal to be on this agenda was that they came and talked to us about their accounts. So what was involved in it, what's, you know, to put the narrative in front of us so that we could understand it on behalf of the residents and the council. Can that be rearranged before May would be ideal?
Yeah, we'll ask Matt through his 151 network to write, and I think it's important in regards to certainly, hopefully we'll have an outcome in regards to the proceedings as well, so that we get an overview on that. But I understand some of that's still going through the mechanism in the Cardiff Capital Region. Obviously, the issue we've got as well on there is the, I think we'll have a report about the education deficits, won't we? That'll be coming to us as well. So presumably someone can speak to Tom about that in due course. Recommendation then is that we endorse the schedule of items for the next meeting. So I'm prepared to move, please. Thank you. Yeah, subject to that, we'll pick that up. Matthew? Oh, Matt.
Yeah. So I did just want to say on the Cardiff Capital Region, I have had some exchanges with the 151 officer. There has been some reluctance on his behalf to attend, but I will ask him again.
Well, perhaps the chief exec ought to come along.
Yeah. So I have asked.
Okay.
Again.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So we've had a mover, we've had a seconder. Obviously, a request will go to Cardiff Capital Region. Anyone against? No, thank you. Item 14, any other items? Just urgent, there aren't any. Part 2, there aren't any. Can I firstly, before I close the meeting, thank everyone for their attendance this evening, for their contribution to the discussion and the debate. And can I wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a peaceful New Year. But I'm sure many of you will be working extremely hard in the new year, given what's coming up. So thank you all very much. And I now close the meeting.